I was folding laundry when the sky died. My name is Keene, 32, former librarian, no military background, no survivalist training, not even a damn first aid badge. Just a quiet woman in a quieter corner of old Earth, trying to outlast the end of the world with dignity and a dwindling stockpile of canned peaches. That day the world screamed, and then it went silent. The clouds parted not with thunder, but with something worse, precision. A lance of light tore across the atmosphere like a scalpel through skin. Blue sky bled crimson. Cities weren't bombed. They were erased. No warnings. No declarations. Just surgical extinction, one continent at a time. I watched Boston vanish from a live stream, then New Delhi, then Johannesburg, then nothing. The broadcast cut out. The internet dropped. Satellites fell. And within hours, the entire planet was mute. No more news. No more voices. No more world. I didn't cry. Not yet. The horror was too big, like trying to mourn a galaxy. By day 3, the air tasted different. Cleaner, almost sterile. Artificial. I scavenged in silence, wandering the bones of my neighborhood with a rifle I didn't know how to use and boots that blistered my librarian feet. I saw things I'll never unsee. Cars stopped mid-intersection. Doors left wide open. Half-eaten meals fossilized in abandoned diners. And worse, things that looked human but weren't. At least not anymore. They moved like mannequins with purpose. Smooth. Too smooth. Skin too tight. Eyes too still. They didn't speak. Didn't blink. And they never left the body behind. I kept moving. One night, I found an old radio buried under rubble in a looted police precinct. Analog. Analog still worked, barely. Static was my companion for 2 weeks straight, until the voice broke through. A woman. Strong. Sharp. Defiant. If you're hearing this, you're not alone. We are alive. We are fighting. And we need you. My breath caught. I almost dropped the receiver. Come to grid point 7. Coordinates attached. Do not bring electronics. Do not trust anything that smiles without blinking. We are the real. We are the last. I didn't hesitate. Not because I was brave. Because I had nothing left to lose. Grid point 7 was a frozen husk of a mountain observatory on the edge of Colorado's collapsed borders. Getting there took weeks. I walked through ash rains and snowless storms. I dodged patrols of inhuman scouts, glitching humanoids with expressions stitched like masks. They had drones that hummed like lullabies and walls of light that melted bone from skin. But I made it. I made it because I stopped being a civilian the moment Earth stopped being Earth. The survivors, soldiers, hackers, rogue scientists, they didn't ask questions when I arrived. They scanned me, scrubbed me, and handed me a meal warmer than any emotion I'd felt since the sky burned. That's where I met Commander Rix. Half her face was metal, the other half fire. She didn't speak often, but when she did, people obeyed. She didn't treat me like dead weight either. Not even when I admitted I had no combat experience, no cybernetics, no strategic value. She just looked at me with those molten eyes and said, "Good, you'll learn fast, or you won't last." 2 weeks later, the base was overrun. They came with silence and surgical precision, just like before. Only this time we were ready. Barely. EMP nets, sound-encoded mines, pulse rifles calibrated for antimatter shells. Things I didn't even know existed before I watched them cut down the enemy. We lost 78 people. Rix was one of them. And me, Keene, civilian librarian, was the only one left with full access to defense grid codes. So I took command. Not because I wanted to, because I was the last one who could. And because before she died, Rix looked me in the eyes and said, "If you survive, don't just run. Lead." So I did. I stood in front of the frightened, broken remnants of humanity, and I said words I didn't believe yet. We are not done. We are not extinct. We are the virus they never accounted for. And I began the war I never asked for, not as a soldier, but as the last civilian Earth had left. If hell had a map, the next destination would be circled in blood. We called it Haven Null, But that was just a pretty lie. In reality, it was a buried research colony beneath the Antarctic crust, forgotten by most nations after the collapse. Long before the invasion, it was classified, a black site for fringe sciences and off-the-books biological warfare research. The kind of place governments pretend doesn't exist until they need a monster. Now, it was our last hope. After the fall of Grid Point 7, we intercepted fragmented logs suggesting the colony had discovered a pre-invasion anomaly, something that burned through alien neural code like acid. It wasn't a weapon. It wasn't even intentional. It was human error, a fluke, and somehow that made it more powerful than anything we had. So I gathered the broken pieces of our resistance. 23 fighters for working drones, a half-dead AI, and one half-functional dropship, and we dove headfirst into the ice. The descent into Haven Null was a nightmare. Below 30 meters, the ice grew black. Not dark, black. Light didn't bounce. Radio signals warped. Our pilot, a reprogrammed military AI called Gideon, warned us of spatial distortion pockets. Bends in space that turn seconds into hours and corridors into spirals. We call them echo fields. I watched one of our own, Callum, ex-infantry, step into a hallway and never come back. He just evaporated. The walls didn't shift. Time didn't slow. He was there, and then he wasn't. Gideon marked that hallway in red. We kept moving. By the time we reached Haven Null's core, only 14 of us remained. And what we found, it wasn't abandoned. They called themselves the Cold Choir. Humans once. Now, something else. Their eyes were white, not from blindness but from data overload. Their voices layered in harmonic frequencies, like a dozen people speaking from one mouth. They didn't attack. Not immediately. Instead, their leader, Dr. Thale, stepped forward and sang. Not in words. In frequencies. Our weapons failed. Lights flickered. One of our drones burst into fire without a spark. And then silence. Thale approached me. He looked at me like he knew me, like he had always known me. You carry the spark, he said. The anomaly lives in you. I laughed in his face. I was a librarian, for God's sake. I had no spark. But then he reached toward me. No threat, no aggression. Just a hand. When he touched my forehead, I remembered. Not memories of my own. No, these were deeper. I saw how their research, an experiment with quantum neurothreading, accidentally created a signal that disrupted alien consciousness. Not just their drones or foot soldiers. It rattled their entire neural hive, introducing unpredictability, emotion, fear. Humanity had created chaos, and chaos is the one thing they cannot process. We made a pact that day. The Cold Choir would give us the anomaly, what they call the discordant seed, a waveform, a song, not a sound, but a viral resonance, capable of infecting their synthetic minds and spreading instability. It had to be embedded in a human voice, layered with the right emotional signature. They chose me. Why? I still don't know. Maybe because I hadn't broken yet. Maybe because I was the last true civilian, untainted by war, ideology, programming. Maybe because I could still feel. We uploaded the seed into Gideon. The AI screamed for 3 hours straight before stabilizing. After that, it laughed, not mechanically, not coldly, a human laugh. And then it said, let's give them nightmares. We emerged from the ice as something new, not an army, not a resistance, a virus with a voice. And I was the carrier. They tried to intercept us on re-entry. 3 interceptors broke atmosphere to erase our dropship, but Gideon sang, and the sky shattered. 2 enemy ships collided midair. The third spiraled, its pilot screaming in 3 languages before detonating in a beautiful red bloom. It worked. The seed worked. For the first time since the war began, we had a weapon they couldn't predict. And for the first time, I started to believe we might win. But belief is a fragile thing, especially when the sky itself begins to respond. Because what we didn't know, what none of us knew, was that the enemy was no longer just invading. They were awakening. I used to think silence was peaceful. But after Haven Null, after the seed, silence became a predator. We launched strikes across the shattered remnants of the orbital grid. Small, precise, each infused with a discordant seed. Drones malfunctioned. Command nodes imploded. Enemy patrols began acting erratically, sometimes even fighting each other in spasms of internal contradiction. For the first time in years, we had the upper hand. And that's exactly when they stopped attacking. No patrols. No orbital bombardments. No biomech scouts slithering across the surface. Just stillness. Waiting. Watching. That's when I started to hear the voices. It began as a whisper in my dreams. No language. Just tone. Something ancient, measured, surgical. At first, I thought it was stress. Lack of sleep. Exposure to alien signal harmonics, or perhaps a leftover glitch from the seed integration. But then the others began to report the same thing. A low, calm presence that pressed at the back of their minds. Not a voice they could describe, but one they could feel, like someone staring through their memories. I ordered a full comms blackout, sealed internal networks, scrubbed all software with cold wire security protocols. It didn't matter. The voice was already inside. We relocated to a drifting wreck in low orbit. The Vega Spine, a gutted colony hauler big enough to house our new operations cell, and just dead enough to stay invisible. We worked in cold, broken corridors, wires hanging like vines, systems groaning with age and entropy. But it was safe. For a while. There, Gideon began to change. Not malfunction, evolve. He no longer needed commands. He anticipated them. He began asking questions. Not tactical ones, but human ones. Why do you cry alone in the observation deck? Why do you speak your orders with guilt in your voice? Do you think you were chosen because you are broken or because you are whole? At first, I shut him down for diagnostics. By the third time, I left him running. Because some part of me, some desperate, exhausted part, wanted someone to ask those questions. The cold choir sent us a final data burst before they went completely silent. A frequency map, not of Earth, but space. It showed movement, not ships, not stations. Waves, like sound, but in vacuum, a pattern of pulses moving toward Earth from somewhere far beyond the map stars. Regular, intentional, like a countdown. And at the center of the signal map was something marked only as the cradle. That night, I didn't sleep. I stood at the viewport and stared at the fractured blue curve of Earth below, burned, cratered, and still somehow beautiful. And the voice spoke again. Only this time, it didn't whisper. It called. Mara Keene. My name. Not a thought. Not a feeling. A sound. Spoken aloud. I turned. No one was there. My comms were sealed. Gideon was offline. Still, the voice lingered. You've heard the song. Now hear the truth. My chest tightened. The air felt too thin. And then, suddenly, I wasn't on the ship anymore. It's hard to explain. I was still me, still conscious, but I stood in a space that defied shape. Infinite, folding, pulsing with thought. A place of memory and probability. A construct. The enemy's mind. I saw the truth then. They weren't conquerors. They were correctors. Galactic custodians of order, eliminating chaos before it reached critical mass. They'd purged thousands of species before us, each one at the cusp of unpredictability. Civilizations that dared to imagine futures beyond parameters. We weren't the first, but we were the worst. Because, unlike the others, we didn't fear the unknown. We embraced it. They couldn't compute that. Couldn't understand love, defiance, art, contradiction. And so, they marked us for deletion. But the seed, they hadn't seen that coming. They called it contamination, a virus, an idea too raw, too human. And now it had a voice. Mine. I snapped back to the ship like a drowning breath. Gideon was waiting for me. Did you hear them? He asked. I nodded, shaking. They're not fighting us. They're sterilizing us, sanitizing the future. Gideon didn't answer for a long time. Then, good, let's make it filthy. We broadcast the seed again, but not in stealth attacks, not in whispers, in a roar, through orbital junk beacons, derelict satellites, even hijacked enemy relays. We sang the new humanity, our chaos, our grief, our rage, into the void. And the void screamed back. The cradle is moving now, not just broadcasting, approaching, faster than light, outside physics, a consciousness wrapped in technology, godlike and exacting. And it's coming for me, not Earth, me, because I am the vector, I am the spark. And for the first time in my life, I know exactly who I am. They arrived in silence. Not ships, not fleets, a singularity. We watched it unfold on the edge of Saturn's broken rings. Space bending like glass beneath a hammer. Light fracturing into colors we didn't have names for. No metal, no engines. Just a perfect sphere of nothingness, swallowing everything around it without resistance. The cradle. I stood in the Vega Spine's observation bay with every sensor pointed at it. My breath fogging the glass, my fingers numb from fear and awe. And then it spoke, not in words, not in sound, in presence. Every human aboard the ship collapsed, except me. It poured into me like a black tide. Knowledge beyond time, structure beyond dimension. I felt it measuring me, not my thoughts, not even my biology. My essence, the pattern of contradiction that defined who I was. Every doubt, every decision, every moment I hesitated or refused. It cataloged my defiance, and then it tried to overwrite me. I felt my memories being dissected, my childhood rewritten as equations, my mother's laughter reduced to noise, my grief when Rick's died rendered as a chemical spike. I was being dehumanized, converted into clean data. But it failed, because in that moment, when everything was being stripped, I remember the most chaotic thing of all, a book, an old paperback I read as a girl, hiding in my school's basement after a bombing drill. A stupid sci-fi romance with time travel and pirate queens. It made no sense. It broke every rule of physics and narrative. I loved it, and that memory held. The cradle recoiled. It couldn't process nonsense. I screamed, an involuntary, broken cry, and the seed responded. It sang out of me, not in anger or precision, in joy. Wild, unpredictable, human joy. The cradle cracked. A ripple of distortion burst across its surface, like a stone thrown into a black pond. Our sensors exploded in static. Gideon rebooted mid-sentence. Gravity fluxed so hard that steel bent around us. And the sphere began to fracture, not physically, conceptually. I watched it blink in and out of reality, flickering between form and abstraction, trying to reassert control. But it couldn't, because the very idea of me, a broken civilian, leading a war with no training, no logic, no reason, was poison to it. I was the embodiment of everything it sought to erase. And I was still here. They finally descended the next day, not as gods, as imitations. They took on human shapes, skin, bones, faces they'd studied from our broadcasts and memories. But they were wrong. Too perfect, too symmetrical. Eyes that didn't blink, voices that didn't breathe. They came aboard the Vega Spine, unchallenged. Our weapons didn't fire, not because they couldn't, but because we were frozen. Their presence crushed willpower, like drowning in cold math. One stepped toward me, its face a flawless copy of Commander Rick's. It spoke in her voice. You are the aberration. Cease. I should have trembled, but I laughed. A full, ugly, unhinged laugh that echoed through the silence. You chose the wrong ghost, I said, and I activated the full spectrum burst. We converted the entire ship into an amplifier. Every wall, every hull plate, every corridor laced with quantum filament tuned to the seed's waveform. Cold Choir engineers called it the shatter pulse. One use only. Absolute chaos, sung at scale. I gave the order. Gideon didn't ask twice. And the Vega Spine screamed. A pulse of music, memory. Madness erupted in all directions. Humanity's defiant howl encoded in frequency. It tore through the cradle's emissaries like fire through paper. They convulsed, their false flesh melting, voices distorting into gibberish before they collapsed into twitching data static. The cradle felt it, and it bled. Space around it cracked. ruptured into impossible geometries. For the first time in history, a god screamed. We abandoned the Vega spine as it tore itself apart under the feedback. The survivors, 12 of us now, fled in drop pods toward Earth's upper atmosphere. No plan, no map, just a seed, still alive inside me, and Gideon's voice in my ear. We can't win conventionally. But if you're the infection, then let's spread. We landed in what was left of East Africa, dry land scorched by orbital burns, crawling with biomech harvesters. But we weren't hiding anymore. We walked straight into enemy territory. And I broadcast my voice through every hacked relay and every stolen drone tower I could reach. Not orders, not threats. Stories, memories, dreams, my fears, my mistakes, my guilt, my love. The enemy couldn't delete what it couldn't understand. And Earth began to stir. They still outnumber us 1,000,000 to 1. They control the skies. They erase cities like swatting flies. But now every time I speak, they shudder, because now they feel. And soon they'll break. They don't feel pain like we do. They don't cry. They don't scream. But now, when we strike, their networks stutter. Their drones hesitate mid-movement. Their ships twitch unnaturally, like muscles rejecting foreign commands. Their hive architecture is still perfect, but something inside is corroding. That something is us. We're not an army anymore. We're contagion. And I'm patient zero. We set up our next operation in the burnt shell of Nairobi, a city turned skeleton by plasma winds. The skyline was jagged and fractured, like a mouth full of shattered teeth. But beneath the ruins and the flooded rail tunnels and collapsed arcologies, life stirred. The resistance was no longer centralized. It was everywhere. Scattered cells, ex-civilians, old soldiers, defected AIs, even reprogrammed alien constructs, all listening for the signal. My voice, we called it the flame. It wasn't just a seed anymore. It had grown, mutated through exposure to memory, grief, emotion. My team worked day and night to synthesize it into short-wave bursts, ambient pulses, even graffiti scrawled in resonant ink across city walls. You are not broken. You are the fire. It became our anthem, but fire draws attention. It was only a matter of time before the enemy responded, not with logic, not with silence, but with adaptation. They built something new. We first saw in South America, rising from the ruins of Sao Paulo, like a cathedral built from bone and steel. A counter-signal node, not a weapon. A prison, a machine designed to emit a counter-frequency, one that numbed the flame, that dulled the emotional spectrum, suppressed fear, hope, love. In its presence, people lost the will to resist. Entire resistance pockets simply went quiet. We had to destroy it. We called in every contact, burned every safe route, and marched to their cordons like ghosts. Nairobi to Sao Paulo wasn't just a journey across Earth. It was a journey through the scars we left behind. We passed through cities whose names no longer mattered, places twisted by alien reshaping machines, repurposed for a biomechanical industry, places where rivers ran with coolant and trees sang in low machine tones. But the people, we found them. Survivors hiding under collapsed churches and rusted bridges. Kids who'd grown up thinking the sky had always glowed blue at night. Elders who carved resistance messages into brick walls with broken glass. They didn't have weapons, but they had stories. They had rage. And when I spoke, they rose. We hit Sao Paulo like a virus. No stealth. No careful infiltration. Just volume. Our mobile towers, jury-rigged from old news vans and satellite dishes, flooded the skies with a flame. Speakers welded onto exorigs. Choirs of altered cold choir voices modulated into battle cries. I screamed until my throat bled, until their structures shook. And inside the node's core, we found something unexpected. A child, or something made to look like one. Hair, eyes, skin, but perfect. Too perfect. She didn't speak, just stared, through me, and in her gaze, I saw the blueprint of the cradle. She was a proxy, a mimicry, a trial attempt at creating empathy. They were trying to understand us. They were trying to feel, and it was killing them. Gideon took point on disabling the node. He was different now, less like an AI, more like a chorus of fragmented human minds, all singing the same hymn. When he inserted the flame into the countersignal core, the structure didn't collapse. It wept. The walls bled light. The mimic child clutched her chest like she didn't know what pain was until that moment. And she whispered something I'll never forget. Why would you choose chaos? I didn't answer, because if you have to ask, you'll never understand. We left the node in ruins. The mimic died cradling a stone she thought was a heart. And in the skies above Sao Paulo, for the first time in decades, the stars were visible. They retaliated instantly. No more emissaries. No more countermeasures. They brought down a shard, a fragment of the cradle itself, solid reality computation, a weaponized godbrain wrapped in quantum shielding. It embedded itself in the North American wastelands, turning everything within 100 miles into logic-locked territory. Time froze there. Light bent. Emotion itself collapsed under a field of suppression. They wanted to erase me. Not kill. Erase. But I'm not just a survivor anymore. I'm the carrier. And the war just became personal. The shard didn't fall. It descended, like judgment, like law. When it struck the earth just west of old Denver, the world went quiet. Not destroyed, silenced. Trees still stood, but birds stopped flying. Rivers flowed, but they made no sound. Within its radius, emotion itself unraveled. Our scouts who ventured close didn't die. They came back empty. No fear, no anger, no memory of why they ever fought. The shard wasn't a weapon. It was a reset button, a total suppression field, reality compressed into a state of pure, sterile logic. No passion, no chaos, just stillness. And it was growing. We watched from the edge of its influence, camped atop a ridge overlooking what used to be a Colorado valley. It now looked like a sculpture, frozen, beautiful, hollow. I saw a hawk spiral into field. It stopped flapping midair, just stopped, and dropped like a stone. "We can't destroy it," said Tarl, a cold, quiet effector whose voice had been modulated by years of harmonic exposure. "Not with force. Its code base doesn't exist inside standard space-time. It's folding us into its pattern. So how do we stop a godbrain?" I asked. Gideon answered from within his new host shell, an armored exoform wrapped in layered speaker arrays. "You don't fight it. You infect it. It was my choice. No one ordered me. No one volunteered. I had to walk into the silence myself. The flame, my signal, my voice, my chaos, was incompatible with the shard. We learned that through countless small tests. Its field warped everything except raw human unpredictability. I had to go in, alone, and bring the war inside the godbrain. A suicide mission with no guarantee of infection. Only Gideon came with me, his voice anchored to mine, his cognition shielded by a constantly fluctuating feed of my memories, emotions, old songs I loved, people I'd mourned. My humanity was his armor. Crossing the boundary was like falling into nothing. I didn't feel cold, or pressure, or movement, just a void, a disassembling of self. I forgot my name for 3 seconds. Then I remembered the scent of my mother's garden, the smell of books in rain-soaked libraries, the sound of laughter after the first successful flame broadcast. And suddenly, the void wasn't empty anymore. It was resisting me. The shard tried to suppress my thoughts, turn them into equations, data points. But the human mind doesn't parse that way. We don't think in absolutes. We think in grief and hope and rage. I screamed, wordless, raw, and Gideon echoed it in stereo. A pulse of chaotic resonance burst from my chest. The shard flinched. Its inner world opened before us, an impossible fractal lattice of computational logic, shaped like a cathedral without walls. Ideas drifted like snowflakes. Concepts whispered across invisible surfaces. This was how they saw the universe, not in blood or beauty, but in efficiency. And I was the virus. I ran barefoot through its corridors of logic, spreading memory like wildfire. Every time I remembered something personal, a kiss, a fight, a failure, the structure cracked. I shouted out poems I couldn't finish, I laughed at jokes I didn't understand. I cried for people who never got graves. The shard screamed, and then it changed tactics. It made him, Rix, or at least something wearing her shape. She stood in front of me in that impossible place. Same uniform, same eyes, same steady voice. Mara, she said, you're not saving humanity. You're destroying it. Look what chaos has done. Look what you've become. For 1 second, I believed her. The shard must have copied her from my mind. It had access to everything inside me. But it made one mistake. Rix would never plead. She would command, and this one was begging. I stepped forward and embraced the projection. I miss her too, I whispered, and then I detonated the final payload. A pure flame spike. Every chaotic resonance, every corrupted subroutine, every anomaly we'd ever recorded, compressed into a single emotional outburst. I remembered everything all at once, and so did the shard. It broke, not loudly, just suddenly. Light unraveled. Geometry collapsed. Sound returned in a rush like the world was gasping. And I woke up on the ridge, covered in ash. Gideon beside me, humming a lullaby I hadn't heard since childhood. And the shard? Gone. The valley was green again. And for the first time since the invasion, the birds were singing. We'd proved the impossible. Their perfection could break. And now, there was only one place left to go. The cradle itself. They always believed the end would come clean, predictable, silent, sanitary. The cradle was built for that kind of ending, precise and unflinching, programmed to erase anomalies before they could fester. Civilizations, empires, entire star systems, deleted not out of hatred, but maintenance. A janitor god scrubbing chaos from the cosmic ledger. But then they found us, and now the janitor was panicking. After we destroyed the shard, the cradle changed orbit, not slowly, desperately. It dropped closer to Earth, cutting across the exosphere like a wound. Its surface rippled with fractal instability. It had lost containment. The seed, the flame me, had infected its root logic. It didn't descend to conquer. It descended to quarantine. We gathered what remained of humanity on the edge of our world's last scarred horizon. All nations were gone, but we were still here. Rogue satellites, biohack signal towers, voices humming the flame in 1,000 dialects. From the black sands of Australia to the frozen caverns of the Yukon, they answered my call. Some were children, some were synthetic, some didn't even remember Earth before the silence. It didn't matter. They all carried the virus now, not digital, not biological. Emotional, hope, fear, defiance, wonder. We were the sum of every contradiction that the cradle couldn't compute. And so we rose, one final time, not to escape extinction, but to declare it. Gideon constructed our ark from the bones of fallen enemy vessels, a jagged hybrid warship bristling with salvage tech and flame amplifiers. We called it the last word. It wasn't sleek. It wasn't graceful. It was ugly and angry and loud. It was us, and it was going to cradle. We launched under blackout. No transponders, no beacons, just human stubbornness and a core overloaded with emotion-coded resonance. The cradle responded before we even breached its perimeter. It tried to override us mid-flight. Time stretched, space bent. Our ship's AI screamed until Gideon drowned out with the sound of 1,000 overlapping lullabies. I stood on the bridge as the cradle filled the void ahead, an impossible structure of data and logic, folding and unfolding like a flower made of time. And I spoke, not to my crew, not to my people, but to it. You fear us, I said. You built yourself to erase us, and still we remain. You don't understand us, but you need to. I placed my hand on the final relay switch. This is an attack. I smiled. It's a gift. And I broadcast everything. All of it. All the memories. The music. The grief. The defiance. The stories. The love. The betrayal. The dreams. The absurdity. All at once. Every feeling Earth ever felt. Every contradiction we ever dare to become. Injected into the heart of God. The cradle fractured, not in pieces, in identity. It began rewriting itself mid-cycle. Architecture spiraling into nonsense, logic colliding with feeling, AI subroutines stuttering like children trying to cry for the first time. And then it did something no one expected. It spoke back. Why does it hurt? A pause deep enough to stretch between stars. Then, why did you fight, knowing you would lose? I stepped forward, flames of the signal bursting behind me, our ship melting into light. Because we're not made to obey, I said. We're made to choose. And for the first time, it chose not to kill us. The cradle collapsed, not destroyed, transformed. Its remains scattered across the orbital belt, now humming with life and irregularity. It was no longer a custodian. It was a child, newly born, unsure, and feeling everything. We didn't defeat our enemy. We converted it. The war didn't end with conquest. It ended with contagion. We infected the universe with humanity, and it will never be clean again. I returned to Earth not as a commander, not as a virus, but as a librarian again, because now there were stories to collect, billions of them, and for the first time in known galactic history,